we had to choose freedom over Fauciism in the state of Florida.
Democrats have never forgiven Ron DeSantis for defying the lockdown consensus and reopening the Sunshine State in the spring of 2020. And today, seeing the Florida governor as a threat to Donald Trump, their preferred candidate for the GOP nomination, progressives are distorting Mr. DeSantis's COVID record, a record which is a political success story.
We're announcing new guidelines for every American to follow over the next 15 days.
Most of us can remember the repeated extensions to the Trump administration's 15 days to slow the spread. But it was in May of 2020 that GOP governors, including Ron DeSantis, broke ranks.
This is a measured step. This clearly isn't the flipping on a switch.
That May of 2020, restaurants and stores were able to open at 25% capacity. And moving into June, Mr. DeSantis eased other restrictions, all the while examining the data and consulting scientists, including those that weren't getting a hearing.
There really hasn't been a full debate. We sort of have landed in those policy by default from this hysteresis of let's flatten the curve.
That summer of 2020, COVID swept through Florida and southern states that had largely dodged the first wave in the spring of 2020. But rather than panicking and shutting down businesses, Mr. DeSantis focused on protecting the elderly, who were at a much, much higher risk.
Residents in long-term care facilities, they represent about 50% of the COVID-related fatalities here in Florida and in many other states.
Elsewhere, you'll remember, the public health clerisy focused narrowly on virus risks, ignoring the social, economic, and psychological damage from lockdowns.
At this time, after more than half a year, the collateral damage is enormous, with children not going to schools, which is not just their education, but their physical and mental health, house evictions, cancer screenings are not being done properly.
In 2020, Florida had the 10th lowest age-adjusted COVID death rate in the country, which was nearly 20% lower than California's, despite the Golden State's prolonged lockdown.
Governor Newsom, open up California now!
Mr. DeSantis's strategy of focus protection, as articulated in the Great Barrington Declaration, is still reviled by progressives today, despite its vindication.
What happened during this pandemic is that many politicians outsourced their responsibility to the public to public health people.
Including Donald Trump.
Including Donald Trump. And the consequence of that is that the normal checks that would allow you to say, well, the politician made a good choice or not, have been offloaded to a set of people who have no checks at all.
Today, progressives have changed tack. Instead, news stories are linking Florida's higher death rate during the Delta wave in the summer of 21 to Mr. DeSantis's refusal to embrace vaccine mandates. What they forget to mention is that Florida suffered a much smaller COVID wave the winter before than in most states. And as we've learned, infections build population-level immunity that extends for many months.
Well, the medical science didn't change. The political science changed.
The press likes to cherry-pick data and present discrete periods to present Mr. DeSantis as some kind of grim reaper. But Florida's overall age-adjusted COVID death rate during the pandemic is 13% lower than the US average and about the same as California's.
The last few years have witnessed a great American exodus from states and localities governed by leftist politicians.
Progressives and Mr. Trump also won't concede that Mr. DeSantis's handling of COVID proved an economic boon.
Since COVID, there's been more adjusted gross income move into the state of Florida than has ever moved into any one state over a similar time period in American history.
The lockdown damage continues to this day, but progressives can't admit they got it wrong. And neither can Mr. Trump either. So they're trying to take down Mr. DeSantis for being right.
Florida is a free state.